How's everyone feeling today? How was your weekend? I guess I still feel like we're just after the weekend, but we're really not. It's Wednesday already. But anybody get to rest at all? Anybody get to take a breath at all? I went to a basketball tournament, my son's basketball tournament, but somehow that was strangely a rest as well because, just go see a game and then go eat some lunch and then take a walk and go see another game. And so I did come back feeling a little rested, even though I was in rush hour. I was in that horrible traffic back from Palm Springs. Yes, a surprisingly social weekend, chasing my young kids around. Yay. Good, good. Okay, glad you're back. I think this is class 4, so we're getting a little rhythm going. And I'd love to start as well. Yes, we'll start with a poem. This is one that has lived with me over many, many years. And again, I always try to choose a poem for you that does feel sort of astrologically connected in some way. And this is by Tara Sophia Moore. And to me, it's all about the power of transits. It's all about the beauty of the planets continuing to move in the heavens and wake us up and soften us and crack us open and help us reinvent. And in fact, I guess you could say that this poem is a very Uranian poem, but I actually just think it has to do with any transit that comes along and gives us an opportunity to grow or outgrow old selves and step into something new. Okay, so it's called Reinvention. There is always the possibility of reinvention, sometimes born of longing, sometimes offered faintly like bird song in your ear, sometimes born of pain. Life is long for a reason, so that every chapter swells with a new chapter of us. So there is time to change the meaning of your name to everyone around you, and especially to you. When the name that once meant tired girl comes to mean she who rose again, then art begins. I met a woman whose house burned down, and in the ashes, she found the blaze of herself. Now it roars, still angry, sometimes uncontrolled, always a blinding light. If you see her on the street, bow to her courage, stare back into her flickering animal eyes, and know she is fighting a fight. I love this. Life is long for a reason, so that every chapter swells with a new chapter of us. So there is time to change the meaning of your name to everyone around you and especially to you. It's just so important for us all to hold this possibility of reinvention. I can't tell you how often I have, felt like, well, it's too late. I'm just going to have to deal with who I am. I'm just going to have to accept the chart as it is. And, this is my little, whatever it is, Saturn in Aries, or this is my moon in Capricorn. This is just the way it is. But every transit gives us the chance to evolve our chart. And it gives us time to name ourselves anew. And I think naming ourselves is a very powerful thing. I remember a class that I took years ago with my father, and I think we gave ourselves soul names at the beginning of the class. She who rises again. And somehow creating a third person, so it allows you to kind of name yourself in a way that doesn't feel so she who makes it through, she who reinvents, she who sings the song at break of dawn, whatever it is. Just give yourself that permission. Give yourself that permission to change. And that's one of the greatest gifts of astrology, one of the greatest gifts. And the title of the poem is Reinvention, and it's by Tara Sophia Moore. Okay. So let's just, for just one moment, I want to point something out about this present moment, just so we also start to get used to looking at a chart and saying, well, what's the most, what's the most prominent thing happening today, And I would say to you, remember how I've always invited you to look at degrees right away to see if there's any, immediate clues. And I would just say to you, this is the biggest thing as far as I'm concerned. We have Jupiter conjunct the North Node, okay? And it's only minutes away because they're both at 3 degrees. And this is happening right now. And if we think about, we've learned a little bit about the North Node in the last class, and we've learned a little bit about Jupiter. So we've learned a little bit about conjunctions, right? So we start to think about the North Node as a point of, I would say, calling in our spiritual mission and calling in our, spiritual assignment, or as I often say, a mini rising sign. And Jupiter, of course, amplifies whatever it touches. So there is this beautiful moment to really amplify, you could almost say, our spiritual values. What is meaningful? What do we want to what do we want to plant in us, like a seed that wants to slowly, surely, rhythmically grow? There's something to me, very calming about this conjunction. It's like, I value this, and I will spend my time here, and I won't rush, and I'm going to trust the rhythm. So there's something about that I find quite potent. And then, then we could also just do the thing where we look to see if there's any other degree that's close. And I would head over to Saturn, even though it is a slightly wider sextile. It's like 33 degrees away, because here's a 6-degree Pisces and a 3-degree Taurus. But I would just say that Saturn is giving us some support for that. Remember how I've been talking about Saturn in terms of in Pisces, in terms of time spent on spiritual pursuits, or time spent in artistic pursuits, or the serious practice. I think that this is like the serious spiritual practice marries what we value, right? Or collaborates. Remember, a sextile is like, we get along, we're having a good time together. So that I would point that out. And then I would also just point out, but at the same time, here's another 6 degree. And, again, what does this look like? It looks like a square, and it is a square. And I would just throw in here, here's this rhythmic growing garden of our values, but there's something going on with Mars, where Mars is a little feisty about it. Mars is giving us a little bit of conflict around it. And, it stirs things up a bit. So it isn't quite so peaceful over here. It stirs things up a bit. So maybe there's a little bit of a rebellious part of us, or a part that can't quite give ourselves to that rhythm. And we feel it as maybe a little inner agitation, So I'm just like playing with this, but the most important thing that I just wanted to point out to you for today, and I think it's just nice, even if people are listening later, it's nice to think about the days on which these classes are occurring and what's the most highlighted, aspect of the moment. And I would definitely say this whole next few days, we're going to be really steeping in this power to manifest, and power to grow, and power to trust, and the beauty that occurs when we actually slow down. Okay. Any other thoughts about that? Looking at this? Yeah, could Mars agitation be a desire to have the garden expand in service to the collective good? Yes, I love it. This is exactly the way to work, Janny, is like, okay, what does Mars actually want to do? It wants to stir us up for the good. It wants to activate us. It wants to make sure that we don't get lazy in our Taurian nature and says, still activate. Yeah. Pluto there also, build an Aquarian age church. I love it. Yes, and this is a good point that Matey's bringing in. We also have the square from Pluto. So the collective good is over here. The stirring up is over here. You could almost say there's a kind of spiritual ambition between Mars and Pluto and Leo and Aquarius. And then it's squaring this power to manifest. I love that. Both Janny and Matey, very good. Feisty Mars can be the percussion to the rhythm and flow. Yes, Samantha, spoken like a dancer. That's beautiful. So if the Mars at 6 degrees Leo is sitting on my natal moon in Leo, would I be embodying this agitation today? Heather, yes, you would. And we're going to learn about that. We're going to learn about Mars moon today, because that's one of the most, I have to laugh at it because it's one of the most palpable, like when you have Mars moon, it stirs things up, whether you have it natally or whether you have a transit. And, by the way, for those of you that are a little more advanced, we're on a little spectrum here. Heather brings up an important point. We are learning about aspects in our natal chart. We're learning about, I was born with this. I was born with Saturn square the moon. I was born with this. But Heather brings in the fact that another aspect or relationship is created when a transiting planet, a planet in the heavens, lines up with our natal birth chart. So Heather is having this Mars moon moment where she might not have it in her chart, right? So as you're listening to the aspects that we're learning, you also have to realize, I might not have it in my chart right now. I might not have Saturn square the moon, but guess what? At some point in your life, you're going to have Saturn square the moon. So, you might be looking at things and saying, gosh, this isn't about me, or this isn't about the 5 charts I have in front of me. But guess what? It's just a matter of time. Yeah, for the most part. Like, you might not have Pluto on your sun in your lifetime, but you might. Yeah. Laura's saying, how important is the house? Is this chart more of a collective view? But if it was personal, we would lay it over our own natal chart. Exactly. So, just to show you, this is the chart of the moment, but let me just show you something. We've seen this before, but but here's Laura. And what I've just done, Laura, is I've put that chart of the moment outside your chart. So the house is more important, like what house it's lining up in your chart, but this outer ring is what we were just looking at, and it's now on the outer ring of Laura's chart. And we're gonna this is what we're gonna get to about class 7 or 8. Okay. But that's what it looks like. Okay. Wonder what it means when someone says a planet is sitting on your sun moon. Yeah, Anna, so that's what we're just describing. We're describing this lineup. So we're describing a conjunction that happens in a transit. So what we mean when we say sitting on, we mean that the planet that is transiting is, for example, sitting on Laura's IC. So here's Saturn sitting on Laura's 4th house cusp, or Uranus approaching her 7th house cusp. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the outer planet affecting the inner. Yeah. And they are in a close conjunction. Yeah. Nguyen, does Mars at 6 degrees Leo now have resonance with natal Mars at 6 degrees Leo? 100%. It's a Mars return. You're having a Mars return if that's the case. And so, yeah, there, Bruna's answered that. Okay. Yes, she is going to be more feisty for sure. Okay. So just to share that with you. But let's go ahead and pick up where we left off. I'll stop the share there and start the share here. Okay. There we go. Okay, so we're going to finish up the sun, I think, relatively quickly, and then we're going to move on to the moon. And the moon is such a juicy position to look at in terms of aspects, because we feel it so deeply. So Sun Pluto, and again, let me just say to you, you might have a Sun Pluto aspect in your natal chart. You may not, but you will have a Sun Pluto aspect in your life. You might have a conjunction, you might have an opposition, you might have a trine. So all of this is relevant, just a matter of timing. So Sun Pluto, Sun having to do with the self-expression, Pluto having to do with regeneration or healing or depth or power. And so we can ask ourselves, is how I wield power, Pluto, in alignment with my highest self-expression and will? And that's a big question for Pluto. How am I wielding power? How am I allowing for the process of death and rebirth in my life? So we have a positive aspect or a easeful aspect. We have an emphasis on intensity, power, transformation, regeneration. We often have great personal power and healing if it's used well. We have powerful leadership sometimes with Pluto Sun. We have ongoing personal transformation. You know, we could say that everyone's life is a life of death and rebirth. We could say that, but somebody who's got Pluto on their ascendant or Pluto on their sun or Pluto on their moon, you know, this is an amplification of that death and rebirth. It's an amplification of the shedding and learning the right use of power. So catharsis is another big Pluto word. And you could also say when the sun and Pluto are connected, the ego, the sun, is invested in the release of that which is pent up. So the sun is like, let's purge and purify. Let's get the toxicity up and out. Let's heal. Yeah. Okay. And then when it's more difficult, you know, it can be obsessive, it can be compulsive, there can be a preoccupation with low desires. You could have, you know, there's possible abuse or trauma, because sometimes someone in your life is playing that Pluto role, right? Which is the abuse of power. And it's in relationship to your son's self, right? And you could also have a little selfishness, or the self-will can be separative with the personal self-will. Like it's more important than I'm powerful. I'm powerful. I don't care about the collective, or I don't care about our collective power. So this is a very, very powerful transit. And I'm pretty much giving us one example for each now. This is a fun one, of course. This is Tim Burton, the filmmaker, with, you know, what's his crazy one about, well, Edward Scissorhands, obviously, but also the Nightmare Before Christmas, right? And you can just feel, here it is, Pluto conjunct the sun. You can feel the fourth house, and this is how I see it. He creates entire worlds. You know, he creates like a whole home for his whatever the movie is. And I mean, he's exploring the shadow. Everything is with the shadow. It's the Halloween. It's this crazy character that has scissors for hands. There's an intensity here. I don't know, and of course, I don't know a lot about his home life, but I would say that would be interesting to look into his past, his childhood, what led to these movies. You know, I bet Caitlin is sick today, sadly. We have to send her good vibes, but I bet she'd know more. But if anybody else knows more about Tim Burton, you know, put it in the chat. But for sure, this exploration of the depths and the dark. And he's a powerful filmmaker in the world, and he's creating, you could also say, like, of the fourth house, maybe he's creating from, you know, there's certain the fears in the water signs, you know, like is it safe? Like he's playing with that edge or around safety of the and the fantasies that we cook up. Yeah. Yes, and Ariel, this is great. Yeah, in a way, it probably helps having it in Virgo to purify the shadows a bit. Yeah, I like that. Also, you could just probably say, here's all that Leo energy. This is his artist energy, and here's the refining. So I bet he's like a powerful editor. I bet he gets right on in there and is, digs in for the precision of the cut in a way. But yeah, you could say the purification there. Who else? Gwyneth Paltrow also has Pluto conjunct the sun in Libra in the 7th house. And you can feel, you never know whether it's for good or for ill, right? It's like, yes, Pluto builds an empire and she's built an empire, and there's a lot of power in the empire. And, it's all in Libra and in the 7th house for her, as I remember. And so, there's also something about the whole realm of beauty, the whole realm of design, the power through beauty and design. Okay. And by the way, here's another little, I always like to give a sort of invitations for those of you that are like, I get it. Every time I bring up somebody that find in the time that I'm talking, find the 3 most important aspects you think that relate to this person. So if you're starting to see the Pluto sun and you understand it, it's like, well, what are the other 2 aspects there that you would say this is the most important thing for this person? And just start practicing how quickly you can see that. Yeah. Jan, and her openness to letting relationship come and go with integrity. Okay, good. That would be, relationships would be ever so significant for sure. Okay, let's look at another one. Okay, this is interesting. Michelangelo. I was thinking specifically about, and this is a strange thing to think about, but I was thinking about his sculptures. And of course, he did Michelangelo's David, but he also did one, and he talked about this, or he wrote about it, where he said that he was always carving, that the sculpture existed there already, and he was just carving the stone away. He was like shedding the stone to get to what was already there, which I think is so Plutonic, right? Like, so he's got this Pluto opposite the sun, which is just bringing in this incredible depth. But that image to me works for him and works for how you could think about Pluto. It's like, what needs to be shed so that the soul essence comes to life? What do we need to release? What do we need to expel? I like that, Bruna. Yeah, Pluto in Virgo, the idea of perfecting that stone as well. Yes. We could think about also perhaps, here's this, brilliant artist among, and all this Pisces imagination, and yet the power of the work, the Pluto Virgo, the power of the work ethic that is required to do what he did, this opposition. Neptune is trining too. Yes, beautifully seen. Bravo. Yes. So Neptune, the planet of the artist, the planet of exquisite sensitivity, the planet of our connection to God, is in harmony with all that as well. Nicole, yes, the opposition, there is like creative friction. I would use more in terms of the square, but I would think of it as in terms of a seesaw until it finds its balance. Like maybe the Pisces gets really heightened for a while, and then, or let's just say the sun in Pisces, and then maybe Pluto in Virgo gets really heightened for a while, and they're trying to find a way to be on the same plane and work together. Yes, Aman, I would use this for everything, not just Pluto on the sun, like the statement about taking stuff away from the sculpture. I would say you could use that in any aspect. It works with any aspect with Pluto. It's just a matter of, let's just say, a trine or a sextile, the stone is coming away with greater ease, maybe, and maybe a square would be a little bit more like, that cracked, and this is not the right chisel, and so maybe it's just a little bit more difficulty along the way. And other good square aspect words, Mady and Bruno put them in too, but I would just say good ones. I would say reconcile. It's a very creative aspect. Take away the friction. It's a very creative aspect. It's a very dynamic aspect. It's full of vitality because there's something trying to work itself out. It's like you're trying to make fire with, putting these stones against one another, right? But it's a reconciling, ultimately, I would say, and and requiring an opportunity to listen deeply. Yeah, help us grow through struggle. Steps toward a goal. That's really nice too. Yeah, it's like the relief after the struggle, right? Or when we feel that inner square, that inner pain, you know what it feels like when finally one side is listened to the other and you can exhale. Okay. It's different than a conjunction because a conjunction can be much more easeful. A square is not generally easeful to start out with, but a conjunction can be easeful. They can be like, I love sitting next to you, right? But a square is rarely easeful to starting out. All right, here's another good example. Sun in conjunct or quincunx Pluto. For those of you that haven't watched Jane Fonda in 5 acts, watch it. It's such a great documentary, and you can learn so much astrology because it's so, she really does have these heightened moments. But look at this, like 4 of the 5 acts are about relationships in her life, or at least, yeah, the first one is the father, and then there's the 3 husbands, and then the 5th one is her. So isn't it interesting that she's got this sun, quincunx Pluto, and where is Pluto? It's right on the 7th house cusp. So it's all about who's got the power in this relationship. Have I, she sacrificed a lot in relationships. She let the masculine have more control than later than she would say she wanted to. She sort of morphed a little bit. So we have this powerful sun in Sagittarius in the 11th house. This is like total activism, wholehearted dive in there, change the world. But there's power struggles that started with her father. And it's an exact quincunx, 29 degrees, 29 degrees. Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. I mean, she still has the moon in Leo in the 7th house, so she still showed up. She was no shrinking violet in any of the relationships, but there was something very significant about these chapters of her life where she married these insanely powerful people. The first one was a French filmmaker who explored all the shadows of things, right? Pluto. The second one was an activist, and the third one was Ted Turner, who was a billionaire. And so all of these are kind of like certainly the first and third are the Pluto. But I mean, just watch it, and you will, and sit there with her chart, print up her chart, like get this slide, look at it, and then and just blow your mind. Because I mean, it's Jupiter in Aquarius, right at her ascendant. I mean, once she woke up, which was very early on, from then on, she was just this incredible humanitarian, right? Sun squaring Saturn, Heather is pointing out. Very good. Yeah, 28 degrees, 29 degrees. So again, she was always, let's go back and review Sun Saturn. She was always looking for the approval of her father. She never felt like she fully got it. And that's a Sun square Saturn thing, where father feels like How do I connect with you? How do I connect with you? Um, so, and then she spent her lifetime breathing in her own authority. And this last act is very much her in her own authority in a big, big way. Okay. Um, yes, and as we learn about transits too, you could sit and watch it with transits, but we'll start here. Yeah, such a good example here. Okay, here's another Marlon Brando, Sun Square Pluto. I don't have a lot to say here, except that here's his son. He's a new moon baby, right? Moon, sun, new moon baby in Aries, in the house of the artist, right? So, and he was such a cutting edge. He brought in the whole new way of acting. He brought in method acting. It was a brand new game with him. And so there's that. And then his Pluto was squaring that new moon. And, you know, certainly he played the Godfather, which if you can't think of a more, you know, Pluto character than that. And Pluto's in the 8th house, which it rules. So you could even, I love acting. I love asking actors and actresses, like, what kind of roles are you generally cast in? And you see it in the chart 100%. So like, for sure, this could be, he gets cast in these kind of darker, broody, you know, filled with money and murder roles, right? But also you could say this part of him required a kind of very extroverted or very visible showing up, and this part is much more like broody, like the Pluto behind the scenes. Yeah. Good. I'm loving that you're seeing all of these. I'm loving that you're putting all these things together, friends. This is great. Sun conjunct Chiron to heal or regenerate the art of acting as well as his own sense of self. Excellent, Janny, 100%. And some kind of wound that he is trying to work out. Absolutely. Grand trine, Neptune, Moon, Jupiter. Neptune, Moon, Jupiter, 100%. Grand trine. And that's something he can just rely on, right? And again, any artist with an elevated Neptune, that's deep, that's really helpful. And Jupiter, Neptune, you can just easily say, you know, big opportunity in film, right? I mean, like, it can be that simple. But any other thoughts about that Pluto there squaring? Nuan, we looked at a T-square last time when we were looking at the beginning of in the early class. We looked at a T-square because we were noticing that the 4th leg of the table was missing. That a T-square is different because there's one part of the cross that's missing. So a T-square is kind of like a combination of aspects. It involves an opposition, it involves 2 different squares, right? So we have certain names for certain patterns, and a T-square is a certain pattern, and it's missing the 4th leg. So you want to introduce the 4th leg as a kind of healing piece. Let's see. Let's do one more here. Lessa, you're saying T-square between Mars, Sun, Moon, and Pluto. Mars, Sun. Yeah, you could give this, absolutely. You could give this an opposition. Yeah, So this could be considered, this is a 7-degree opposition here. And then this is fine for the squares. So in other words, you could say, and it kind of makes sense, that what's missing is the Libra in Marlon Brando. And Libra is all about the relationship, and the conversation. And it's kind of funny to me that a lot of his acting, he was not, you couldn't understand him. Like, I mean, like, he had that way of, like, he sort of mumbled a little bit, and like, so that maybe there was something about the Libra part that he needed to grow in himself. Yeah. Okay. Ariel, yes, since the sun and moon is conjunct, would that affect the moon as well since sun is square Pluto? Yes, it would be also moon square Pluto, 100%. Moon and sun square Pluto. And we'll talk a little bit more about moon square Pluto, but that would have a lot to do with, you know, how he was mothered, fears of abandonment, things like that. Okay. And Janny, again, Pluto and Cancer, just like Jane Fonda, ability to reveal the tender emotional parts of the self. Yeah, I mean, there's something about this is a very generational, it's like 20 years of Pluto in Cancer. So it'd be a whole generation that was reckoning with what is family, and even what, you know, even like country, like what is my country, what is my family, and you know, was it still there? How long did it stay? 10 degrees. It probably was still there as World War II was getting underway. But big death and rebirth around the idea of family. Okay, Tina Turner, great to look at her, right? So beautiful. We love Tina. Thank you. You know, powerhouse, such a powerhouse. And this is just an easeful, beautiful one to say, here's Pluto in harmony with her sun, and we just feel her power, right? She steps on stage, you feel her power, you feel her depth, you hear it in her voice. So the 2 degrees Leo, 4 degrees Sag. Yeah. Sometimes you just name a person and you're like, what planet would be the most, you know, what planet would you think of? And I would absolutely think of Pluto for Tina Turner, and maybe a little Jupiter too. But and there's such an easeful conversation going on there. They had to adjust the mics when she went in the studio. Oh my God, that's fabulous. We're going to look at her again a little bit with the moon too, because we want to look at the moon Mars. But that just gives you a little example of this. And yes, it's another grand. Well, it's not. Whoops. It's not totally a grand trine in fire, because it would be, you know, it would be like the sun, Pluto, and then Jupiter in Pisces. So it's still trine, but it needs to go another degree in a few minutes to get to Aries. But yes, this would be part of a trine. So yes, I said the 2 planets that I would think of are Jupiter and Pluto, and there they are in harmony with the sun, right? Trine, trine. But this is a good example, friends. This is a good example of a grand trine does not always involve the same elements. Here's Leo, here's Sagittarius, but here's 28 Pisces, and here she is a musician, an incredible musician, a deep musician, that is lending itself to the fire. Ooh, this is cool. I didn't know that Tina loved astrology. She made all her record execs give her their birth chart. That's fabulous. Why would you say, what's one of the things that you notice in the chart about why she might like astrology? What would you pinpoint? Uranus. Yeah, exactly. Uranus at the midheaven. There it is. The planet of astrology right at the top. Yeah. Okay. Good, Megan. I was going to say that, but not sure why. And I love it because, I mean, you know, that's the intuition kicking in. Why is it important? Uranus rules astrology. Uranus rules thinking out of the box. The midheaven is the highest point. It has a lot to do with your career. You're going to live your career outside the box. So she's going to ask her record producers who are, you know, a 10th house relationship for their astrology. Yeah. And by the way, people who have Uranus conjunct the midheaven, I think I've said this before, do not like having bosses, right? They do not like having bosses. They're like, and I've always heard, I also talked to a lot of people that have said, okay, it's okay if I have a boss, but they cannot micromanage. I will lose my mind if they micromanage, right? You need freedom. You need to, you know, be self-employed, or you need a boss that's like, I totally trust you, do your own thing. And I'll be back to check in on you in 6 months. Nuan, Aquarius is the sign that rules astrology, but Uranus is the planet that rules astrology. You have signs and planets, they're different, and they both rule astrology. Okay, and if Uranus is at the fourth house cusp, which Janie is asking about, that is all about the revolutionary in the home, alternative mothering or parenting, maybe an unstable home initially, maybe you move 72 times because you're in a military family. Maybe Uranus comes up through the roots of your tree, and you come from a long line of revolutionaries, lots of different possibilities, Okay, good. We're going to keep moving. Okay. Sun nodes. So we're just going to touch on this. All right. Again, we were started out talking about the North Node and Jupiter conjunct the North Node today. And so if the sun is there in your chart, the sun will shine its light on your spiritual goals. It's a beautiful conjunction or relationship. Or you could say the sun offers its self-expression to the enlivenment of the North Node. It offers its light to the enlivenment of the spiritual goal. If it's aligned with the South Node, it has a lot to do with your past and working out things from your past, or the past can be very present, or it can demand attention. And so, initially there might be more things to work out from the lineage. Yeah, okay. What I heard a therapist recently say, if it's, and you've probably all heard this, and maybe you've certainly heard it, if it's hysterical, it's historical. If the reaction is hysterical, it's a historical thing, right? If you have a hysterical reaction, it comes from the past, which I thought that was kind of interesting. Oh, Samantha, yes, you have it on your South Node. It's a crawl out. Okay.
I heard is if you don't have a historical vision of reality, you have a hysteric vision of reality.
Oh, okay. I like it goes both ways.
And in history, you learn that.
That's good, matey. That's good. Okay, well, here's a good example of Sun conjunct the North Node. Ram Dass, amazing, spiritual teacher, definitely cutting edge, definitely new, bringing in the new, bringing in presence, bringing in the idea of be here now. Aries is a sign about being. It's not a sign about doing. It's ultimately a sign of identity and being. And here he is with the sun and Uranus exactly conjunct, talk about the revolutionary, conjunct the North Node. And this is a leader. This is a forerunner in his career, a revolutionary, bringing in a different way of thinking about our little personality selves. And his mission, you could say his spiritual mission with that North Node, is to bring forth and to embody the new. Yeah. So this is quite a lineup for somebody that really woke us up to a spiritual path. Yeah. I wish I had any other details that we know about Ram Dass that we can say. Was he doing much experiments? Did he do experiments with psychedelics along with the, yes, he did, didn't he? So again, the kind of like the new frontier, the cutting edge, but he had such warmth. And there's the Cancer rising, Jupiter and Pluto. Talk about another indication of somebody who was a transformer, who was a agent of transformation, I should say. There's Pluto right exactly on his ascendant. This is a powerful chart. This is a powerful chart. Sun, Uranus, Pluto, ascendant. If you have a planet, a major outer planet sitting on your sun and on your ascendant, like you get extra juice flowing through there.
He abandoned traditional education. He abandoned Harvard to go to India and meditate and do psychedelics and go crazy, right?
Yeah. Right. Yes. I think he probably had Harvard psychologist who was a pioneer with psychedelics. Yes. So in a way, also you could say The Cancer part of him might have been initially the more traditional part of him, like, this is what you do, you go to Harvard, or this is what my family did, we went to Harvard. But then maybe, what the other part that had to take off and have a different kind of spiritual mission was this North Node in Aries conjunct Uranus conjunct the Sun. And then eventually he could come back to the Cancer and say, the whole, WHOLE, the whole is seen as one, a teacher of oneness, a teacher of wholeness. Okay, good.
But he also did this whole thing about like the caring of a family as a spiritual practice. Like there's the Cancer. And I can't type that fast. So
yeah. Okay, that's great.
and so he really revolutionized so many ideas and then brought them like from the heavens down to practicality.
Thank you. Yes. And Bruno's saying he also had a strong power struggle with his father, and that was part of this process of individuation. And there it is, Saturn opposite his rising sign, opposite Pluto. Like, I have to stand on my own. Whenever Saturn is in a hard angle with a multitude of planets, it can have to do with the need to stand on one's own. Okay. And yeah, this is interesting, Joanna, that he came from a good Jewish family and he was so out of the box. Cancer rules the whole, rules Judaism. There are certain signs that are connected to different religious paths as well. And Cancer is deeply connected to Judaism. So that's interesting as well. And then the stroke transforming his life. It's fun. It's such a good chart. We can't help it, but that's Uranian, right? A stroke is Uranian. So it's the sudden, it's a wake up, and it did completely transform his life. And there was such a gentleness after that, the stroke, right? Okay. Okay, good. All right, excellent. This is so good. We could spend a whole class on this guy. He's amazing. Let's continue though. I just want to touch a little bit. We're not going to do every aspect here, but I want to touch a little bit on Chiron, Sun Chiron. Bruna just went to an astrology conference and spent a whole day talking about Chiron. So we need to have her teach us a Chiron class. But I would just say, of the positive Sun Chiron aspects, that the healing is invited and emphasized, and that when we have ease with Chiron, we can come forward as that healer with greater flow and greater ease. And when it's in a more difficult aspect, there's the discomfort of the wound is initially more present. Okay. Caitlin also talks a lot about Chiron as our spidey sense, our superpower. Ultimately, she talks about it as how others see us in our power wherever Chiron is, but we feel like it's a wound initially, so it's like she also should contribute to that conversation. Okay, so let's look at just a couple here. I think this is a very interesting one. The Queen, Elizabeth II, and we know that she had to take on the crown for, the fourth house, the family lineage, very early. It would not have been her choice. You could feel her Taurian sense of responsibility and duty, and well, this is what I must do. But sitting right next to her son for her whole life is this, is this pain, is this wound? And so that's, and it's deeply connected to the family line. And so I just think that's fascinating. And, if you get the sense that she had to always make the responsible choice for the family, right? And yes, this is interesting, Aman, that they're conjunct, but in different signs. It's 2 degrees away. And so there's something about Chiron and Aries where the wound is around coming forth. The wound is around leadership even, or the wound is around asserting the self. And yes, we saw her as a very stable and sometimes stubborn and sometimes fixed energy. but maybe there was a part of her that she never felt like could really come forth with Chiron and Aries, or maybe she had to learn that throughout her lifetime, what brought her the most pleasure. And if you think about it, I don't know if you like watching The Crown and watching, you know, that she loved to go to Balmoral, like she loved to go to her home, like her little respite, her place away, and that's where she felt most healed, walking in the hills, you know, and being by herself. And that's maybe where the Chiron and Aries self could come forward. And you're saying, Sheena saying, and with her Saturn in conjunct Chiron in the 4th house. Yep, so we have this in conjunct here, Saturn at 24 degrees Scorpio and Chiron at 28 degrees Aries, connected to the father. The wound would be the wound somehow connected to the father. Yeah, that one would take some time to, what would I say, flesh out. But yes, internal struggle, 4th house of nation and country. Matey, this is good. Okay. Also, Chiron, beyond wound, represents the rainbow bridge, the link between Saturn and Uranus, karma and dharma. This is very good. This has to be part of our Chiron class, Matey. But yes, how do we go from what we have inherited to what we're meant to carve out and give as our dharmic offering? And that's another way of talking about how we go from the wound to the healing soul offering, and sort of the split between Saturn, which has more to do with the with the karma, and Uranus having more to do with the dharma, or the gift. Do you want to say any more about that, Matey? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. Because we usually associate Chiron only to the wound, and yeah, thinking that we're gonna be wounded there or hurt. That is part of it, but it's a lot about parts that we feel insecure. But once we accept them and embrace them, they become your gift. They become your talent. They're actually your secret talent. Once embraced, you become the magician in that area in your life. So that's the tricky thing. It's wounding when you reject it.
Ooh, so good.
Rejecting being imperfect, rejecting being less than divine. But once you see the less than perfect as also divine, that's actually your gift.
Gosh, that's great, Matey. The wound, when you reject it, it's such a good way to hold it and to create compassion around it, and to welcome it back in, to give it a seat at the table. And then I love that you also use the word magician too, that it can become that magical point. Thank you for that. That's really powerful. And Karen is saying North Node in Cancer on the descendant seems to add to the sense of family. Yes, there was, again, part of her spiritual destiny is to create the larger sense of family, or to stand for a larger sense of family. And of course, you know, we run into all the things about colonialism and all of that. But when we look at her role as she saw it in the monarchy, it's like to hold a larger sense of family. Isabel, I'm not sure what you're saying here about the MC. I see. Oh, I know what's the problem here. This is a the problem is this is not a Placidus chart. Usually I do a Placidus chart. Somehow this is an equal house chart, which means that 21, 21, 21, which means that the midheaven is actually at 25 Scorpio. You would see that in a Placidus chart. So this is the midheaven, but due to the fact that it's an equal house chart, it's not right at the 10th house cusp. So just for the most part, somehow we ended up with equal houses for these. So this is the midheaven, okay, Isabel? Sometimes it will show up looking like MC, and it will only happen when we have an equal house. Okay. Yes, and we will make sure to include the chat when we hand it out. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Here's another one. I mean, an interesting that I used both from the monarchy, but here is Diana, and my goodness, she is very Chiron, right? Like, and there it is, trine her son. I mean, here is her profound sensitivity, her profound mother energy with everyone, seventh house, and here's the Chiron. And if we used Maidie's way of thinking, you know, maybe there's a part of her that like rejected her sense that she is connected to the divine, or felt her own profound insecurity with Chiron and Pisces. But in fact, if she could say, oh my gosh, I actually am this, I have this incredible conduit, this download from the divine, and I'm willing to stand in that and feel my sensitivity as a strength, you know, as magical, you know, I'm willing to do that. Because also third house, how she connected with everyone, right? Incredible ability to connect with every human and just have a little chat that was healing. Yeah. You could even, you know, you could even make a case that her moon at 25 degrees Aquarius, it's 11 degrees away from Chiron, but still it's interesting because her moon in Aquarius is, you know, I am the people's princess. I am the humanitarian, and I bring my exquisite sensitivity to every conversation. Yeah. And yes, you guys are, I'm loving how you're making these, you're figuring it out. So Chiron is trine Mercury, and Chiron is trine Neptune. Yes, Laura. So again, how is she going to express her incredible sensitivity? Through nourishing words, through mother words, through loving words.
And look at the North Node conjoint the ruler of the moon, Aquarius, in Leo, right? So saying, yes, you are the people's queen.
Aha, yes.
Just that, right?
Yes. And so, yeah, Maidie's pointing out that, and that Uranus right here rules the moon. And so sitting next to the North Node, it's her own form of Ram Dass, you know, it's her own form of waking us up. It's her own form of equality for all. Yeah. And yeah, the South, Keely, this is very good. Yeah, the South Node, the fact that it's conjunct, you know, yes, where does this initial pain come from? What's the past lineage? Is it this lifetime? Is it a previous lifetime? But it definitely is like the old wound, or the old or the rejection of that part of her occurred from very early on, we could say. But yeah, it's equally important that there it is, that it's next to the South Node. Okay. Okay. Okay, we are going to move on to the moon today. It's important. So there are other aspects that we could look at with the sun, but I think we covered a lot, okay, as an initial thing. And what we did is we covered a lot of aspects. We covered all the different positions. So now it gets easier as we're looking, and I can already see that you're getting it, putting pieces together. So the moon is so deeply important, right? Because it is this incredibly tender place. It has everything to do with our emotional life, with our past behavior, with our habitual behavior, with our mothering, with our how we were mothered. It's like aspects to the moon we just deeply feel in the body, and you cannot ignore them. And I like this idea that well, let's just read this out loud. Emotions, mother, childhood, physical and emotional body. What is a person's attitude towards tendencies established in the past? How much will she allow herself to be governed in the present? So in some lives, that moon is checked. You know, maybe Saturn is in relationship to the moon. In others, the emotional life is more promoted, like maybe Jupiter in relationship to the moon or Venus in relationship to the moon. Or we could say in others, it's thrown forth aggressively, Mars in relationship to the moon. Or we could say in some, these habitual behaviors are asked to dissolve, Neptune, right? Or Pluto in relationship to the moon, they're cut off, they're ejected, they end. So what are we doing with our habitual behaviors? And what are we doing around how much comfort and safety we allow in our life? Like, how do we treat the tender and, you know, the tender animal of our body? That's the moon. So how we were mothered. And then remember Caitlin talking, I think it was in the last class, about the moon position but how we child. So sometimes it's also the moon position has so much to do with how we show up to teach our parents, what we have to offer our parents. So it's deeply important, any relationship to the moon, because it's the planets talking to this child part of us, this tender part of us. Okay. So, and having said that, you know, I would say the most important aspects to the moon, or the ones that I notice the most, or the ones that have a huge say, would be from like Mars on out, in a way, you know, because what we're going to look at is interesting, but they're not often like the defining aspects, right? So a moon Mercury aspect, it's the emotions, the moon, with communication. How do the emotions and the communications do together? So when it's positive, we speak, write, and think spontaneously. We have an ability to articulate, Mercury, our feelings, the moon. There's comfort, the moon, in communication. There's intuition, and ability to be able to verbalize what one receives through inspiration. And I think this is a big one, spontaneous talk, because the moon has a spontaneity to it. Mercury is how we communicate, and also just, you know, communicate well with women, or communicate well with the divine feminine, because of the moon connected to the divine feminine, connected to the mother. And then, you know, the negative, we could have like the emotions could be stirred, or a tendency to speak before thinking things through, or we could feel one way but not have the ability to communicate the feeling with as great ease. Like maybe we feel a little bit circumscribed in our feeling, and we want to find a way to talk about it, but we can't, because we don't have Mercury in a position that feels easeful to that. Okay, so let's just take a peek of a couple people of Mercury moon conjunct Mercury. I think the Louise Hay one is an interesting one. You know, for those of you that don't know, Louise Hay wrote a book called You Can Heal Your Life. She was a huge person that spoke a lot about healing, and spoke about the psychological and spiritual aspects connected to physical healing. And so she took every ailment, you know, from asthma to you know, kidney malfunction, you know, and she would give an emotional component to it, and she'd give a mantram with it, and she'd give, you know, ways to heal it from a psychological and spiritual perspective. So I think it's interesting that her moon in Scorpio, which has so much to do with the deep dive, the researcher, the healer, is there sitting next to her Mercury, which is the writer. She wrote many, many books, and she had a way with connecting with the public. And her book, her book, You Can Heal Your Life, was a very beautiful book, you know, rainbows, and like, it was very attractive, right? So she did all this deep psychological transformative work, the moon, but she made it very accessible and palatable. So you can heal your life. Like that was her main mantra. You can heal your life. So that combination is I think that's a good example. I was obsessed with Louise Hay too. I remember like she made this rather terrible CD of songs with a band that she had that were very like new agey, that were like, you know, sort of singing mantrams. I love and accept myself exactly as I am. And I used to like, I was at a dark hour in my 20s, and I remember like driving to Kilgore, Texas, singing these. And my friend was in the car with me and being like, these aren't very good, but I'll sing them with you. You were very, but it's exactly what I needed. And I was definitely obsessed with her too. Let me just go back a second and say, Laura, you're saying you're confused about what I said about from Mars on out. I'm just saying that when I'm looking at a chart, like this was a sort of sweeping thing. When I'm looking at a chart, I very rarely will say to the person, oh my God, I'm noticing that your Mercury is conjunct the moon. Like that's a smaller aspect generally. Whereas you really start to feel Mars affecting the moon and Jupiter affecting the moon in larger ways. So that's all I'm saying. I'm just telling you what I tend to focus in on. But we should learn them all. We need to learn them all. Okay. Okay. So then also just James Earl Jones, come on. I mean, this is just like he speaks, and there's his moon in Capricorn, which is so full of authority. And there's his Mercury in Capricorn, which is so full of authority. And he's the father to us all. And there it is on his ascendant. I mean, come on. It's right there, right? It's like he's not going to give a lot away. There's his Saturn too. Like, is he going to suddenly spontaneously improvise? I doubt it. You know, it's like everything is so deep and structured and serious and strong. And, you know, we believe him. He could sell us anything, you know. I mean, right? I mean, that's just the lineup. It's so, if you don't know James Earl Jones, just go Google him and listen to his voice. Okay. Megan, is Saturn his narrator presence? Yeah, look, Saturn anywhere is like the authority, right? And is you can trust me. You can trust me. Morgan Freeman too. You can trust me. I have a very trustable voice. It's solid, and I am holding you with my voice. Yeah, I am your father. Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. I'm your father. I mean, this is just such a good teaching example, because here he is calling in Capricorn, calling in the authority. His Mercury, the planet of communication, reveals that. His moon, he's comfortable in that domain. He's comfortable in the climb and in the achievement. And Saturn is there just disciplining it all. And I mean, that's a very interesting combo there. And a sun in Capricorn, my God, look at that. That is quite a stellium. So that's a good example of moon and Mercury. Okay. Oh, look at that, Janny. Apparently he had a stutter as a child. Maybe Saturn in Capricorn to create structure and discipline to manage the stutter. 100%. That's fascinating. Winston Churchill too had a stutter. And there was something, you know, there's something about, again, maybe like akin to Chiron. Sometimes Saturn would work akin to Chiron, where you come in with like, is it okay? You know, Saturn in the first house, is it okay for me to come forth with all this authority? Or, you know, can I dare to come forth in a first house way? No, I can't, you know, like there's a hesitation, which maybe is connected to the stutter. And then his whole practice is to show up, ground, claim, steady, breathe in the Saturn. That's really fascinating. Thank you for pointing that out. And yeah, exactly right. Probably not good at articulating his feelings with that Moon Saturn conjunction, spoken from a Moon Saturn conjunction person, Karen, right? And then yes, Uranus in the third house could be connected to the stutter as well. Absolutely. Absolutely. And squaring Mercury. Yep. Okay, let's look at another one. I guess I was thinking about this with here's another person, Bono, who's like really committed to his activism. Taurus is so magnetic, this is, and is so connected to his voice. And here we have Sun, Mercury, Venus. This is like the beautiful voice, right? And you could say, if you were just looking at that, you're like, oh, it's a beautiful voice. It's grounded. It's calling in all his, following over many, many, many years. And yet here's this moon in Scorpio, which is like, that's not going to be enough. Like I need to feel like we are addressing what the truth, we're addressing what's under the rug, and so there's something about that opposition. It's a 8-degree opposition, but that Taurus and Scorpio are always, Scorpio is always detaching from a particular desire and helping evolve the desire, right? Helping change desire to aspiration. So there's something about this deeply private, deeply intense, deeply warrior moon opposite a quieter, more methodical Mercury, where they have to find a way to work together, which he clearly has. And yeah, moon Neptune for sure. This is the musician, among other things. Extreme sensitivity versus extreme solidity. Yeah. Let's look at another. Here's a moon sextile Mercury, Obama. This is, a great, the sextiles are so lovely. They're just easeful. They just help each other. And in this case, they're even more connected. Why? Because he has the moon in Gemini. What rules Gemini? Mercury. So they're even more connected. Like they have even a sort of a shared, the ruler is connected to the moon in Gemini. So you have this ease with language, and then you have Mercury in Leo, which is the confident communicator who speaks with 6th house precision. Okay. And then, but you also have the one that can, you could even say, has the language, Gemini, for his country, 4th house at the moment. Do like you could even say the language of the family. And of course, for him, the moon in the 4th house, family, enormously important at all levels. But just this facility with language, this precision with communication, and this confidence with communication, all working together. Yeah. Good. And let's do a couple more. Moon square Mercury. Again, this is interesting. So here's John Lennon. Here's this, his emotions, the moon, have a certain detachment, Aquarius in the 11th house. Again, a certain detachment. But also you could say he's comfortable as the humanitarian. So, he's comfortable with that kind of impersonal love. And yet he wants to communicate, Mercury, with a deep intensity, Scorpio. So Scorpio, to have this square is the wrestling between the part of him that wants to emotionally detach and the part of him that wants to get in there and wrestle with feeling, and particularly in the realm of relationship. Yeah. Joanna, all the houses are going to be different shape, different sizes in Placidus system, and as you get further north, the houses get smaller in certain areas. And he was born in the UK, so with Placidus, you don't have the same size houses. 6th house is equally large. So you can feel the creative friction there, right? And certainly you can feel maybe it's like his activism, moon in Aquarius, versus I mean, like, yeah, it is so interesting, the whole thing about like how the Beatles all fell apart and all the intense relationships. And so there's something about how he was in one-on-one relationships versus his true comfort with a kind of impersonal loving. Good. Okay. And I said we'd come back to Diana, and we are, and we did talk about this a little bit last time. I mean, just 15 minutes ago. This is another interesting trine because it's a trine not in the same element, right? So she has 25-degree Aquarius. So how many degrees are left in Aquarius? 5 before it gets to Pisces. So this is a trine with 8 degrees off of the exact trine, because it's 5 degrees to Pisces and then another 3 degrees to 3 degrees Pisces. So 3 degrees Pisces would be the exact trine, but this is an 8-degree, off trine. But still, so isn't that interesting that it's kind of like the impersonal love of the Aquarius, the humanitarian, does flow with her Mercury. She does give a voice to her people. She does have tremendous care. So she had this interesting combo between the part of her that sort of almost did need to detach a little bit and the part that wanted to care for everyone. Yeah. Good. It's just good to go chart after chart and practice seeing what we see, and practice naming these aspects. Good. So maybe we'll just, there's only a few of the moon Venus, so let's just do a few of the moon Venus, and then we'll call it a day. But moon Venus, emotions and love, right? Emotions, the moon, Venus, love, or what we consider to have quality, what we value. When this is an aspect, a positive aspect, when the feelings and the love nature unite. It's often very appreciative, very loving, very social, gives beauty, Venus, to form, the moon, or giving form, beauty. And you could also say, and this is a good one, it helps you refine the habitual behavior. It helps you shine a Venusian loving light on your habitual behavior. So you can change through love. You can change through like the soul loving guidance. And then if they're not well aspected, sometimes it's hard to express the Venus affection, particularly with family, if they're at odds. Yeah. So let's just look at a couple. Sometimes you're also just really pretty, like Brad Pitt, when you have the moon conjunct Venus. I mean, it's like, or just easy. You're easy with the moon Venus. There's there's a beauty to the emotional life. Things sort of flow, and there's his moon, Venus, Mercury. I mean, like that huge lineup in Capricorn. So in a way, you could say, well, maybe this is a person that's working really hard, but making it look full of beauty and ease with the moon Venus. I like this one over here. I like Edwin Hubble, that Hubble telescope. This is interesting because, again, we have like the scientist who is, through his deep research or deep innovation, sending these incredibly beautiful images back, right, through this telescope. And it's all in the 3rd house of collecting information So there's something about his researcher self, the beauty piece of it, Venus, all in the third house of collecting data. You know, it's like collecting beautiful, deep data, right? And I don't know a lot about his personal life, but again, you can see there's an incredibly strong stellium here. And I always think it's so interesting when Scorpio and Virgo are working together in a powerful way. They're sextile one another. And it's like the precision of Virgo and the depth of Scorpio. Yeah, Shayna, exactly. Scorpio in the third house, tenacity with his research, never giving up, seeing it through. And obviously, whenever Saturn is right on the ascendant, there is such a commitment, work ethic, sense of responsibility. So moon, Venus there. Oh, I wanted to ask, who knows about Divine? I wanted to ask Caitlin about Divine, actor, singer, drag queen. Does anybody else know about Divine? If you do, write anything that you know. But I put this in not really knowing a lot about them. But this is a moon opposite Venus. And I would just imagine that, look at the opposition. It's a Libra Aries opposition. You have this kind of very beautiful Venus, Neptune in Libra, even conjunct Jupiter there, which to me feels so the beauty of the masculine and the feminine. I mean, Libra is the both and, and so there's big beauty here in the 11th house, which goes your own way. A lot about relationship, a lot about love. And then you have this kind of feisty and independent, more divine masculine energy of the moon in Aries. So there's something about self versus relationship. There's something about the desire for beauty and merging with Venus and Libra and making sure the other is well cared for and happy versus the moon, which needs its independence and feistiness. Divine wasn't afraid to do gross things on film like Itaku. Okay, that's interesting. So that might be more the Aries moon, beauty, love, and healing through drag for community. I think this is the drag community, like this 11th house. And then the Scorpio is the part that's not afraid to do gross things, right? And Jupiter conjunct Chiron, we're pointing out. Yes, exactly. See, this is good. An exact conjunction of Jupiter and Chiron. That is the capacity to act as a big healer, a big rainbow bridge for community. 5th house of creativity and the inner child and the heart coming forth to heal. Exactly. Yes. So there's just some pull between, I would just say Venus and Libra values partnership, values relationship, values beauty, values the conversation. And the moon in Aries might be a little bit more used to going solo, And so it's not a hard opposition, but you can feel a little bit of the tension between the Libran attention to relationship and the moon that says, I feel more comfortable flying solo. And then we'll skip Neil Armstrong. We like you, Neil, but we're going to look at moon trine Venus. And let's just look at Walt Whitman, who was such, if you don't know Walt Whitman's poetry, please, Google and read something out loud, because it's so deeply celebratory of beauty and the body and of equality of the sexes. And here he had this gorgeous Venus in Taurus. Venus loves to be in Taurus in his first house. I celebrate myself and sing myself, and all these stanzas about how beautiful the body is and embodiment is. And again, this is another trine that is not in the same element, because again, we have to imagine that the moon in just 1 degree would be in the sign of Virgo. So Virgo and Venus, Virgo and Taurus are trine. So the moon and Venus are trine, and it's like he has great confidence and great sense of self with this moon in Leo, and he's celebrating, you could say Leo is celebrating embodiment, Venus and Taurus. So that's a lovely, yeah. Mady, were you seeing something there? Yeah.
Just the chart is beautiful in itself, right?
Yes, it is. It is. He was definitely an advanced being. He was definitely an advanced soul. Can't tell for sure, but seems Venus and Moon are also trine midheaven. Yes, they are, my friend. Exactly. Here's the 3-degree Capricorn midheaven. And, again, he had an authority. He spoke, he wrote with strength and authority. Megan, again, an opposition, we don't want to put it either way. Like it could be difficult, really difficult, or particularly with planets like the moon and Venus, which are not innately full of friction, the opposition isn't going to be as hard. Or what might be hard is what I described, that solo sense of self versus the merging sense of self, but it's not going to be a difficult opposition. Exact trines, exact trine, yes, will always share the same element, Janny, because it's exact. So yes, it will always share the same element. And yes, this amazing conjunction in Pisces, this is Pluto, Chiron, Saturn. Whew, I would just say he was definitely dialed in to the spiritual. He was connected to God. That's what I want to say. Like he was connected to the divine. He was doing the work of helping humanity grow in terms of physical, emotional, and mental and spiritual health. He was helping us evolve because he had such a profound connection to using poetry to access something greater than ourselves. Oh, you might be right, Samantha. Surgeon in the Civil War would make sense with all that Pisces too, because Pisces and Virgo are so connected to health and healing. And I would just say this also, with Saturn on the ascendant, a responsibility to speak for the spiritual and to Aries rising come forth, even though he was attacked and belittled and what is this crazy person writing about? He felt a responsibility, Saturn, to come forth, Aries rising, on behalf of Pisces, the great mystery. All right, my friends. We did it again. You were asking great questions and you were seeing a lot, and I'm so that really feels good. And I will include the chat when we send out the link to the class so that you can review the chat. And if there were any questions that weren't answered, we can make sure they're addressed. And yeah, and by the way, Janny's just saying a sole responsibility, North Node in Aries in the first house. Yes, when you have the North Node and the rising sign in the same sign, it's a big deal. Like it's a double whammy around your spiritual calling. Okay, so we'll see you on Saturday. We're off and running, and great work today. And thank you so much. I don't underestimate, or whatever I'm trying to say. I value you being here deeply. I value you being here. All right, we'll see you on Saturday. Take care, friends.